So thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much, Joachim and Michael. I'll introduce you in a minute. Just share with you a dream. Indeed, a dream, because I was listening to psychiatrists Daniel Sampaio and Portuguese writer João Tordo, and I remembered a dream that I had just last week, which was I had been arrested because of something that I had written. I write for a living, and it was my first day on jail. And I escaped jail, not because I wanted to disappear, but because I needed one book, one specific book, which was Crime and Punishment from Dostoevsky. And I ran home, I got Crime and Punishment from the shelf, took it, and ran back to jail. And when I got there, I knocked on the door, and the guard said, "I'm afraid you cannot get in." Why is that? Because you will be trialed again. Not only because of what you have written, but now because you have escaped prison. And I said, "But look, I didn't murder anyone. I didn't steal anything. Look, it's just a book." And he answered me, "A book? That's even worse." Well, I guess we all share the same dream, which is that more people read more books. And in order to achieve that, we also need to speak about new formats and new business models. And it is a privilege to have you among us, and thank you very much for that. Michael Tamblyn he has, for almost 10 years, I think, the president and CEO of Kobo in Canada. He has had a tremendous impact on Canadian publishing industry, in the way that it's doing business, the way that it moved online. And at Kobo, he has led the restructuring and the turnaround of the company, but also the growth whether by acquisitions and partnerships. And today, Kobo is one of the largest e-reading companies in the world. Ebooks, audiobooks, and even devices, e-readers that you sell. Joachim, he comes from Germany. He was born in a family that already owned a publishing house back from 1816, Kaufmann Verlag. And he is now the CEO of Carlsen Publishing, which is the market leader for children and young adults, comics, manga, and cartoons. And he has this, I suppose, unique experience of both leading a big company, publishing company, and also being the shareholder of a small family-owned company. So you will be able to share that with us. Well, I myself, I'm a journalist, so as I was saying, I write for a living. I have been more than 20 years in newspapers. I'm now at television, and in all of these places I have led the digital transformation. And even today in television, I mainly write. And just yesterday, CNN appointed the new CEO, and the new CEO, Mark Thompson, his main experience in the US is not television, is digital. He has saved the New York Times from almost ending when readership of printing edition was in danger. And today, the New York Times has more than 5 million digital online subscribers, which is amazing. So even in television, we are all but addressing the digital transformation and how to keep the pace with our readers or viewers or whatever you want to call them. So Michael and Joachim, thank you very much once again. And I do feel that although media is completely different from publishing houses, and the way that people read news is different from the way that people read books, of course, I sense that we face the same, I will call it damnation, maybe you will call it opportunity, which is we are not just competing with each other. Media companies are not only competing with media companies, publishers are not competing only with publishers, we are competing for attention, and we are trying to get attention from people and that they keep their attention on, on books, of course. So, starting from your own experience, I'll start with you. From your own experience and your own view, what can you share with us about new formats and new business models?
Well, I think you're right in that as much as we as booksellers and publishers work across different formats, we sell books in print, we sell books in digital. The competition isn't between whether a book is in paper or a book is on a screen. It's not between whether a book is sold online or whether a book is sold inside a store. We're in a fight for time, and we're in a fight for focus. And I think for the first time, we're not just competing against television or against newspapers or against movies. We're competing against companies who have essentially been able to put a price tag on our attention and then have devoted a huge amount of money and time and resources to try and capture that attention and monetize it. And so the work that I think each of us do in a lot of ways is about trying to fight for that portion of time for books and for reading. And both because it's integral to the businesses that we all work in, but also because there's a need for the kind of storytelling, the kind of information, the kind of thinking that books deliver that is hard to deliver any other way. That doesn't come through in the social media space. Doesn't even really come through in the course of a journalist on television or in print. We're about the deeper thoughts and the longer stories. And we need to do everything that we can to fight for that time.
And in what ways does audiobooks and ebooks, which are different, of course?
So much of it for us is meeting a reader where they are. And so instead of having this very kind of idealized view of the beautiful room full of books and the beautiful library and the beautiful bookstore, it's how can we put reading into a piece of time in a person's day? So whether that means being able to have someone instantly be able to download a book because they've just heard about it and we can capture that attention and turn it into a book purchase, or whether it's Instagram poetry that then is moving into the print world or the digital world, or audiobooks where we get that piece of people's time where they like driving or going to the gym or running, where really they should not be reading books at all. So all of that is about trying to find that time.
Is there any pattern between the kind of books that are most read and the difference on the books that are most listened to, meaning fiction or non-fiction? Is there a difference?
We see a difference, yes. We see more fiction being read. We see a more balanced fiction and non-fiction being listened to. But then we also see different demographics showing up in sort of ebooks versus audiobooks. So interestingly, the audiobook listener is often younger than the ebook listener. Is also, there's a more even balance between male and female, and but I think that's just different people finding the use for a different format at a different time.
So younger people are listening more, and older people are moving from print editions to e-readers?
I think we could get into a whole separate conversation about what drives people into different formats, and especially different formats at different times in their lives. We have one of the greatest children's book publishers in Germany here who can tell us all about what drives children into reading. But there's some very interesting things that happen as people reach different points in their lives and the formats that are important to them in those contexts. We had, two wonderful authors talking to us about the importance of books for children. And yet the greatest demographic challenge that's facing Europe right now is an aging population. We need to be thinking as much about how we keep people reading as they get older as we do making sure that they start reading at the beginning of their lives. And that has everything to do with formats, with accessibility, with audiobooks, with being able to make print bigger, and being able to make book purchasing more accessible.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Joachim? What can you share with us? Why are you investing so much in these new formats?
Yeah, new formats is a good thing, because is reading innovative or publishing innovative? I would say you can look on two different angles. It's very, very traditional. We are doing more or less the same as my great-great-great-grandfather in the beginning of 1860. So we're looking for good content, and we try to get that content into the right format and to reach readers. And that's pretty much the same we are doing today. But there's a permanent innovation on how to get the time and the attention of the readers, like Michael just said. So I see it as a small publishing house, Kaufmann Publishing, or a pretty big publishing house at Carlsen Publishing. It's pretty much the same. You have to find the right format, and the format can be different formats for printed books. It can be digital formats, it can be audiobook, which is increasingly more important. It has changed the market during the last 5 to 10 years tremendously, I would say. But it's also about, for example, I returned this March from South Korea. The webtoon, we are a big manga publisher, Japanese comics. The webtoon business is changing, probably changing during the next years, the market. So as a publisher, you always have to have your ear on the market very closely and on your audience. And your audience is changing. I was surprised, for example, since 2 years, there's a big new trend, young adult, new adult. So as Pedro presented the figures for Portugal as well, the 15 to 30-year-old, 34-year-old readers, and it's more 15 to 25-year-old readers, they are increasing, which is it's a big news, I would say, because it gives us some hope that reading has a future, and I strongly believe that reading has a future.
So what you're saying is that competition is not so much between small and big companies?
Exactly. It's like in the Darwin world. It's not the strongest and the biggest who will survive. It's the most adaptable companies who will survive. And I would say publishing is a permanent change. So a good publishing house is never finished. So you always have to adapt to new audiences, to new formats, to new ways of delivering your books. And if you're doing a great job, and it doesn't matter if you're big or small, within our group, we belong to a big publishing group or media conglomerate, Bonnier. They're very small publishers, but they are doing an excellent job, increasing and are very often more profitable than the big players like Carlsen. So it's not about the size, I would say. Size, in some cases, size matters, or size is an advantage. For example, if it comes to investment into technical developments. But a smaller size also means more flexibility.
What's the trend in Germany? Share with us, please. Is the market is also decreasing? Is it the market?
The book market in general,
market, yeah.
Trade. So if I talk about publishing, I usually talk about trade publishing, I must admit, because I'm not an expert. There are some experts in STM and educational publishing. The trade publishing market has increased a lot during Corona. In the beginning, I was afraid what happens to the market because the bookstores closed. But in the end, there was more time, as Michael just mentioned, and time to read is the most the most important asset for us, because there's a clear restriction of time if it comes to social media, to TV, and other media. And there's a strong with Netflix. But I always try to emphasize the chances with all these development. For example, if we talk about social media, I'm father of a 16-year-old daughter, and of course TikTok is a relevant social media platform for her. And of course that takes time from reading. But on the other hand, and we will have a TikTok speaker later on this stage, on the other hand, it's a huge advantage for getting attention to books, to content, which we publish, and we are good at publishing good content. So BookTok, TikTok is I would say it's a big gift for the publishing industry. Same with Netflix or other streaming platforms. Of course, we are in competition with them about the time, but on the same hand, looking at the manga market, for example, it's mainly driven by anime. And where are they broadcasted? At these platforms, and there are more and more platforms, so more and more readers are interested in manga publishing or in manga books, and this mark has tripled within 3 years, which I have never expected.
And it's now, I suppose, somewhat mature market, the manga.
At the moment, it seems to be a bit more mature, but you never make a forecast. You only know one thing, that it's wrong.
So you are optimistical.
I'm in general a very optimistic person. So.
Yeah, Karin Pans also is. I suppose you'll listen to her to an intervention from International Publishers Association. Are you optimistical as well? Where do you find the optimism?
I am. I'm optimistic, first of all, because we keep finding new ways to reach readers. And the one, I think we all feel a great, both emotional attachment to the book as a form and to the resilience of the book as a way of delivering stories and a way of delivering information. But at the same time, it's an industry that is constantly finding new ways to reach a reader. And I think if we have collectively one job, it's to take an author's work and then do everything we can to put that book in the right reader's hands. And whether it's poets on Instagram, romance novels being recommended on TikTok, us generating new algorithms to help connect a reader's interests with a book that they might be interested in, we keep finding new ways to do that. And that's both in some ways for me the most interesting part of the job, and is also the thing that gives me the most hope, because that's where we compete. That's where we fight back against all of those other challenges. For attention is, at that moment when someone hears about a book, hears about an author, can we get that book into their hand? As that book is ending, we're in this, this sort of high-risk moment where if we're good at our jobs, we can put a new book in their hand and then we have them for another week. And if we're bad at our jobs, we lose them for a month to Netflix. And they binge watch 6 seasons of some show. So that's the space that we're living in now. But we've never been short of new ways to be able to do that. And whether that is in terms of how we sell books or finding new models in which a person can have those books in their lives, we never lack for creativity there.
Mm-hmm. And you don't fear the power of social media and those, is the algorithm going to run our lives and your lives in the sense that the choices are being conducted as well?
I mean, I think of that in a couple of ways. One is my concern with social media is more about the fragmentation of attention.
Okay.
And so in many ways, I see books as part of the antidote to that. They are our ability to sustain a thought, to live deeply in a story, to immerse ourselves in something instead of being pulled into 100 pieces, chopped up and having that attention sold. And similarly, where I worry about the algorithm is in the erosion of the public discourse, in the effect that it can have on political discourse, on cultural discourse. And books, again, are the antidote to that, because that is where we as a culture do our deep thinking. That's where we express more nuanced arguments and ideas. And so keeping longer form media in the context of the cultural conversation and political conversation is vital to having a functioning civil society, because the algorithms are easy to manipulate. They do function on outrage as the primary form of attention that drives them. And so we need to be able to counteract that. Books is one of the most powerful ways we can do that.
And Joachim, what about what governments can or should do? We have talked previously of some things that should happen. What's your view on regulation, on stimulus of reading? What should European governments do?
Yeah, I totally agree with Michael that reading in general, but reading books is absolutely crucial for the society. So I think it's always underestimated in the political world how much support reading should get. If I just a month ago there was a news article about a subsidization in Germany of 10 billion euros for a factory, for a chip factory. And I read this number, and this is the size of the total book market. And I thought if just a little percentage, just 1% of that money would be invested into the society, into reading. And there are so many good programs, and very often in Germany, for example, they run out of money. So I think it's really important, and there I partly disagree with Michael. I think it's very important to start with children, to get them to reading in a very early age, as we have heard with the colleagues from Portugal. At a very early age, mainly at home, reading with them together. But there are families who need support in doing so, who need the books, who can't afford the books, or who don't want to afford these books. So I think there's a big need for the politicians that they find ways, and I think there are good ideas at Appel how to promote reading and how to get children's and of course also adult people to books. And this investment it's a long-term investment. It's not a payoff next year or in 5 years. But I think it's a very, very important long-term investment, especially with the social media, which I see from a professional side as a chance, but I share Michael's opinion. It's a big risk for the long-term development of the society and even of the brains of human beings.
What about?
If I could build on that for a second, where I would, I think, combine our two ideas is that both from a policy perspective and from an industry perspective, we need to be focusing on all the different places that we lose a reader. And we know that one of the primary determinations of whether a person becomes a lifelong reader as a young person at 4, 5, 6 years old is whether they see books in their own home. And the program that exists in France to provide book tokens to children so that they can, in some cases, buy the first book that has ever been given to them, and that I know is in discussion here in Portugal as well, is with that idea of how do we get over that first barrier of becoming a book lover. You lose people at the next point, which our first speaker talked about, in teenage years, when you become worried that your friends don't think that reading is cool, your friends don't think that reading are part of the things that you do when you're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. That's where social media can absolutely help us. That's where the ability to look at Book Talk, Instagram, all the other places that people go to find influence, and if they find books in them, and again, if they have a book that they own themselves, becomes an incredible determinant as to whether they become a lifelong reader. And then I worry about them at the end of their lives too. That's it.
In a nutshell, just to end, when we look at new formats and innovation in the future, what are we looking at? Are we looking at AI? What will be the main drivers? The next, I don't know if big thing, but the next thing.
Probably the next big thing is AI in publishing, and that shapes the publishing industry in a way we don't know yet, honestly. There will be big advantages, especially in producing the books, but of course there are several risks as well, also for authors and especially translators, for example. So this is the biggest challenge, but also, I would say, the biggest chance for us as an industry. And I'm very curious about this development and will try to invest a lot of my personal time as the CEO into that development.
I noticed this, the biggest challenge or the biggest chance. It is quite a...
Yeah, I'll take a risk and I'll say that I don't think AI is the biggest thing that is the biggest disruptor to this industry. I think there's a lot of low value content creation that does get displaced by AI. I think it's going to be a great place to get summaries of information. I think it's going to be a good place to get procedural instructions, and AI is going to be able to tell you how to fix your dishwasher. Like, those are things that I believe it's going to be good at. I don't think it's going to be good at telling narrative stories the same way, frankly, that most of us are not good at telling narrative stories. And we're supposedly actually intelligent. So if I look ahead to where I see the beginnings of disruption in our industry right now, I see it in two places. And it's not the usual place that you would expect. With both music and video, the transition from print to digital created a huge disruption in distribution. We don't see music stores with CDs in them anymore. We don't see video stores with DVDs in them anymore. But that didn't happen in books. We still have healthy, robust bookstores today. But where we will see disruption, and it's hard to see right now because it doesn't show up in the kinds of studies that we saw at the beginning of the program, is in the relationship between the author and the publisher. And that's where we are seeing significant disruption even now. For Kobo, 25% of the books that we sell in English right now are coming directly from an author to our platform, bypassing a publisher entirely. 1 in 4 books. And that doesn't show up in book data anywhere. It doesn't show up in bestseller lists. But you have now a significant piece of the book market that is coming directly to the consumer from an author. And these books are often, by the way, indistinguishable from a professionally published book. They may have still had an editor, they may have still had a designer, but they no longer had a publisher. And so that, if nothing else, is forcing publishers to really look at their relationship to authors more deeply. It isn't assumed that an author needs a publisher to find, in some cases, a huge audience anymore. And so that's both created a lot of interesting kind of experimentation going on the author side, and is also forcing publishers to take a look in the mirror and think about, how do we make sure we're really good at this so that we can continue to maintain this intermediary role? So that's one. The other one is selling books one at a time and selling them through streaming services and subscriptions. Books remain right now as the only model left in media where you can still sell a single unit of consumption for 20 euros at a time. So you can have all of the video in the world that you want for 10, 11, 12, 13 euros, or you can have one book for the same price. And as a person selling books, I really like selling books one at a time for 20 euros. That works really well for me. But at the same time, I recognize that there's a segment of the market who's just looking at it and going, I can't afford this anymore. And we want to make sure that we don't lose people at one end of the economic spectrum from a reading perspective, at the same time that we do want to capture as much value and revenue as possible for new books as they come out to new authors. We should be selling books one at a time. When they're new, we should be selling them one at a time when we drop the price on them. But at a certain point, we also want to see them in streaming and subscription services where we can capture that value further.
Okay,
That would be a long new topic, but we are running out of time, I think, for that.
well, whatever the future, I hope it opens up rather than narrows down what we are reading. I suppose that my dream was also about that, about the suppression of liberties and whatever can or cannot be said today, whether by law or by social media or by self-censorship. When we start forbidding books and banning words, we are banning thought, as we know. So in the name of society and democracy, let's hope that we all thrive and readers read more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.